Greetings all. This is Hiru Asan Anu, and I'm bringing to you a new podcast entitled Anu Family. I will be speaking a bit on this concept as well as my motivation for creating this particular podcast and the nature of the forthcoming sessions. I'd like to begin by defining family itself, coming from my book Suicidal Family, a manifesto for healing and avoiding the aftermath of cross-cultural unions and marriages in captivity. From page 9, family can be defined as the fundamental group of any society which consists of two or more individuals with the same goals and objectives. Originally, family was defined by those who served the household. This is an old definition with New World relevancy. If the family or home is an entity unto itself, the members who reside under this entity should show supreme allegiance to it. As they serve it, it serves them. How this family is served is defined by home culture. Now, on extending the definition or the concept of culture, I'm going to pull from my same book on page 22, where I say, from the Latin colere, we have culture, meaning to cultivate. Culture is the all-encompassing, self-regenerating organism that defines a society's way of operating in the physical and spiritual world. Culture, or the developmental element, defines spirituality of a society, logic, tradition, societal norms, perspective, objectives, economics, politics, education, art, values, language, and overall disposition of a people. Culture also holds its own built-in defense mechanisms. Pulling from, I'm actually going to go to page 9 again before I continue on, to kind of just elucidate a bit more the concept of culture. Culture defines how race, sex, religion, education, morality, psychology, and the world as a whole are perceived. Culture is a living, breathing organism that fights for survival and dominance within the psyche of an individual and community. Therefore, two cultures will fight for dominance if placed in the same place or same space. If these cultures are forced to exist together in a unit, that unit will turn on itself, and much like an organic body whose immune system begins to war with itself, will eventually kill itself. So this, in effect, is the meaning of the concept of a cross-cultural union, and obviously we've kind of highlighted what family means and how those two can interplay together to basically create disaster. In order to maybe bring it home to some, I will offer some examples of what we mean by cross-cultural unions. And keep in mind that we're calling them unions, but in effect there is no unity, so it's somewhat of a misnomer. But there is a new age idea that's kind of propagated that, says that we're all one culture, we're all one people. There's a universality that many have tried to promote, which in effect is 9 times out of 10, the root of it is one particular culture trying to either homogenize and colonize others into their way of thinking and being as a means of control, or it's a means to make one particular culture's abnormalities appear to be normal by saying that we're all one people, all one culture, which in effect is not true, for various reasons as we defined, just even looking at what culture represents and how culture is formed. But one example we could have of a cross-cultural coupling would be one where there's a co-parenting situation with individuals who have different or adverse investments in their religious or spiritual doctrine. Of course, what this creates is when you have children, they are going through rituals that begin to mean less to them. They lose their impact because now you have different standards warring for position in their spirit. And of course, even with this, it creates confusion as to what spirituality is, what a supreme being is, what the supreme intellect is, because now the path has been divided and split. And sometimes a child will decide, or youth or an adult will decide, to leave the concepts or the ideas of spirituality alone altogether because of this madness. Another example we could look at is one where there's a co-parenting situation again, and you have one mate who decides to take the higher road to awareness on their life journey, and one who decides that they are fine, happy, and where they're at. There's a level of complacency there. Well, what begins to happen then is obviously the vibrations are changing between the two. They begin to behave like strangers amongst one another. And again, even when you're dealing with the children, there begins to, what I found, resentment is formed, usually by, either because, again, one culture and your mate decides not to. Eventually you're going to resent one another, and you run the risk of your child resenting you both. Regardless of how correct either one of you feels that your stance is, a child needs to see a united front. Another example is one where you have, which is a similar situation, when you have the same type of scenario, but in a dating format, where you'll have one individual who manifests their desire and their purpose to evolve, while their partner chooses another life direction, which may appear to be one that is devolving their position in their life journey. So sometimes what begins to occur is what I call missionary dating, where you're dating the person, but you're trying to convert them. Whether you're trying to convert them to your way of spiritual practice, or your social or cultural stance, or if you're trying to remove them from their own in order to recapture what you may have had originally when you first met. Because sometimes people evolve after they couple with another, and that creates its own level of confusion. Because many people, once the ego kicks in, the first thing is, I want things the way they were. I want things, you're not the person I met, and I don't even know you anymore. You hear those type of statements. Well, you're not going to know the person, because if the person is evolving, then in effect, they're becoming a new person, and that could even be happening down to the molecular DNA level, which is another discussion. But the problem more so in these scenarios, or I should say the effects, is, firstly with children, is that when you have that type of split camp reality, children develop a sort of torn loyalty syndrome. They don't know if my mother or my father, which one I should listen to, or they begin to play both sides. And they find the loopholes, and it creates a spirit of manipulation amongst your children, as well as divisiveness. In a family setting, when you have this type of cross-cultural format or reality, the family in itself can become schizophrenic, in that it's now cultivating multiple personalities and conceptual and ritualistic postures based on the postures of the divided parents. So you may be taking certain rites of passage and rituals and things of that nature that may coincide or align with maybe indigenous teachings, or just maybe off the beaten path cultural stance. But then there may be the issue of christenings and bar mitzvahs and things of that nature, and some of these concepts are in direct opposition to one another. So again, the children, they begin to develop multiple personality disorders, because when they're with either parent, especially if this is post-marriage, or the parents are not residing and cohabitating together, then the child knows that with that, whatever parent that they're currently spending time with, that's the mask that they have to don. And in that, again, you create a very severe pathology amongst your children in terms of distorting and perverting their own identity foundations. You know, another issue that you'll find that comes up with just family as a whole is you'll have a lack of family and sibling unity. And children will, of course, sometimes choose to side with either parent based on what's going on, or they may choose to completely abandon the teachings of both parents altogether and opt to invest further into the predatorial welcomings of a society that only seeks to manipulate them and drive them further into the bowels of consumerism. So oftentimes the media becomes surrogate parents, you know, or the school teacher or certain government officials, because of the parents' egos lobbying for their children's alliances. And of course, this can turn siblings against one another. And sometimes, sadly, this is done purposely in order for, again, these parents to have their own personal allegiances and alliances. It's sickeningly childish. One other piece that you'll find sometimes happening is that a child, like I said, can abandon the path of both parents individually and collectively and go rogue at that point. And they may choose a life doctrine pre-designed by, again, the predatorial facets of a society, and that they turn their backs on the madhouse of their family. Of course, this is dangerous on multiple levels. In a dating or in a sort of coupling scenario, this can cause one partner to completely stray from the road of their own life purpose by sheer distraction and by choosing their lover poorly. I would say, to kind of draw a picture to this, you know, if you can imagine that you have the ability to fly, and it's an earned ability. You know, you worked and you developed that talent, and you couple yourself with one, and by coupling, let's say you lock arms, and you're trying to teach that person you're coupled with how to fly, but they only want to stay earthbound. They don't want to soar where the deities and spirits soar. They want to stay on the planet. Now, let's say you can fly, but you only have the ability to transport or carry yourself. So, in effect, what happens is if you stay coupled to a person like that, they will keep you earthbound because you can only carry yourself. You can only go through the doorway yourself. And this happens more often than not. And again, what occurs is a person never really gets to fulfill their life purpose as long as they're coupled or attached to a personality that chooses not to ascend or soar. So, you know, those are just a few examples. I kind of just want to touch on my motivation for writing this work, Suicidal Family. You know, I would attend a lot of cultural events, and one thing that always kind of stood out to me is that I would see most often women and their children, and I would never see husbands. I would not see whole families, you know, at certain events. And sometimes it may have just been a drumming class or a dance class or even martial arts class. And you would see maybe the husband, no wife, or the wife, you know, no husband. Or sometimes the children would just be dropped off. And I started to see amongst the community of those who consider themselves to be, whether you want to call yourself light workers or spirit workers or dark workers or, you know, magicians or the conscious elite, or those who are spiritually and socially and consciously aware, I started to see this split camp, divided family scenario repeated time and time again. And questioning different people I know, and just having certain casual conversations, started to see repeatedly that, people didn't necessarily share the same investments culturally with their spouses. And this created all kind of fury and scunion for them, back home. So even their conscious friends, let's say, or their cultural friends, or their spiritually minded friends, were not even able to maybe go to their homes and be entertained or relax with them or fellowship with them, because their spouse was so vehemently opposed to what they were doing that they almost had to regulate it to not only outside the house, but doing things in shadows and in secret, because they didn't have familial support. And often what I also saw amongst the community of those who are more consciously aware, more politically aware, they would have children who exhibited a lack of loyalty and a lack of devotion for either parent, based on, again, hearing varied reports as to what life should look like, or what parenting should look like, or what their childhood should look like. And some children just give up altogether. If I was to say that this was not a pre-designed ensnarement, I'd be lying. One only need to study some of the state agencies that have been put in place, over the past 100 years to really understand what the goal is here. And, when you have children in this type of scenario, the goal is to take them. The goal is to take their minds, to claim their minds, and to claim their cultural postures, so that they can work in the benefit of the elite few who regulate and control the mass societies. So it's very important, again, or I felt it was very important to write a work highlighting this, and these podcasts, of course, coming forth will be going deeper into them. But keep in mind, that a family is a foundational structure that's sustaining and growing the greater community. If your family is divided, or if your family is dysfunctional, or if your family is retarded, then the community has no choice but to reflect the same disease. Without strong familial structure, there is no community. Family as defined, and I also want to highlight, because I know, nowadays family can be defined as many different things in terms of how it looks. Of course, mostly what we see through media and what we've most been raised on is the Western nuclear format, which is not necessarily the most healthy at all. In many ways, that nuclear family model is a fragmented form of family, and it's what's led to many of the problems that I spoke to previously. Stripping the presence of extended relatives and elders removes the protective shell that should surround any family nucleus. When you have that nuclear family, again, it's mother, father, child, or 2.5 children, as they say. But it doesn't account for, aunties and uncles and grandma, grandpa, cousins. And that's your protective shell. That's your community of validation. And even when there is some division in your nuclear home, you can oftentimes go to your extended relatives for a level of anchoring and stability. But these type of families are not highlighted. Even in times, like if we go back to the Great Depression, if you want to call it that, because there are some that say that certain groups of society now are experiencing, some are experiencing a recession, but others are actually experiencing depression. But one of the reasons why people were able to survive through that horrific period of economic collapse in the U.S. was because there was so much extended family living in the home. So they were combined incomes. It was a form of communal living. But, things like childcare were not an issue. Even being able to go in-house to receive or to retrieve certain talents. You may have an aunt who can sew, or maybe your grandmother has a garden. Your father and your uncles can go out and haul lumber or strip copper piping, things like that. So having that familial clan, if you may, is what strengthened the overall community, because your community grows from you as an individual. You have a community within yourself, and then you partner with another individual of the complementary sex, and you create family. That family creates clans. Clans create villages. Villages create nations. Okay, but it all begins with one healthy mind and grows out from there. Unfortunately, these roles of extended family have been, I would say, insidiously replaced by media figures, government and state officials. And then we wonder how the youth have become so lost. But in fact, the youth are not really lost. They're just misguided by the same entities that propagate, their miseducation. My book, Suicidal Family, attacks these issues and provides practical solutions. One of our first steps to rectifying these issues is to discuss them. So again, in this format, I discuss them from various perspectives, and really uncover the plague our families have been overrun by, and the healing medicine that's necessary in order to create a new family. Okay, so again, I thank you for listening, and feel free to reach out at haruasan.com. That's www.haruassaan.com, or also anunation.org, ANUNATION.org. I also have a Twitter account, which I don't use as often as I probably should, but it's underneath my name, and Facebook and so forth and so on. But I'd love to hear from you on this topic of suicidal family. I think it's a very serious one, and I know many of you know me for the spiritual work that I do, as well as podcasts and things like that. But this is a part of it. Your family should be your spiritual doctrine, your first spiritual doctrine. Your family should be your religion. So again, I felt it was important to really address it and address some of the problems that we've all been dealing with within our family structures. So for now, I will say peace, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon in forthcoming podcasts. Be well.